Mountain Cowboy gave up on love until she walked through the blizzard to save him. The blizzard hit Pine Ridge without warning, turning the mountain pass into a wall of white fury that swallowed the world whole. Most folks had enough sense to stay indoors, huddled by their fires, waiting for nature's temper to pass. But not Ella Monroe. She stood at the window of her tiny cabin on the edge of town, watching the snow pile higher against her fence, and felt the familiar weight of being invisible settle over her shoulders like an old, worn blanket. No one in Pine Ridge ever really saw Ella. At 28, she was the woman people looked past, too plain, too quiet, too content with her books and her garden and her solitary life tending the town's small lending library. She'd learned long ago that being overlooked was safer than being noticed. Noticed meant expectations, meant disappointment when you couldn't live up to whatever people decided you should be. But tonight, something pulled her attention beyond her own four walls. Through the driving snow, she could barely make out the shape of old Mr. Henderson's ranch house across the valley. The lights were out. All of them. In weather like this, that meant trouble. Welcome to Heartfire Obsession. If you love stories of courage, unexpected romance, and second chances, don't forget to like and subscribe. This is a story that will change everything you thought you knew about heroes. The impossible decision. Ella's hands trembled as she pulled on her heaviest coat. This was insane. The storm was getting worse by the minute, and Mr. Henderson's ranch was nearly 2 miles away through terrain that would be treacherous even in good weather. But the old man lived alone since his wife passed, and with his bad heart and the temperatures dropping below zero, no power meant no heat. Meant death if someone didn't check on him. She'd called the sheriff's office 3 times. The line was dead. The whole town's phone system was down, and the road crews were overwhelmed. No one was coming to help. No one even knew there was a problem except her. The wind hit her like a physical blow the moment she stepped outside. Ella tied a rope around her waist, anchored the other end to her porch post, an old mountain trick her father had taught her before he died, and started walking. Each step was a battle. The snow was already knee-deep and rising, the wind so fierce it stole the breath from her lungs. But she kept moving, following the fence line she knew was there even though she couldn't see it, counting steps, trusting muscle memory and instinct. 20 minutes in, she could barely feel her feet. 40 minutes, and she'd lost track of how many times she'd fallen. But there, emerging ghost-like through the white chaos, was the dark shape of Henderson's ranch house. What she found inside. The front door was unlocked. Mountain people never locked their doors, and Ella stumbled inside. Ice crystals clinging to her eyelashes, her whole body shaking so hard her teeth rattled. The house was dark and silent and cold as a tomb. Mr. Henderson? Her voice cracked. Mr. Henderson, it's Ella Monroe from the library. Are you here? A groan from upstairs made her heart leap. She found him in his bedroom, tangled in blankets, his face gray and drawn with pain. Heart attack. She'd seen it before when her father went. Don't try to move, she managed, her frozen fingers fumbling for his wrist to check his pulse. Weak but steady. I'm getting help. Phone's dead, Henderson wheezed. Been trying 4 hours. I know. Ella's mind raced. The storm would last all night, maybe longer. The roads were impassable, and even if she made it back to town, there was no guarantee anyone could get through. Henderson needed help now. That's when she heard it. The sound of a truck engine, impossibly close, cutting through the storm's howl. The man from the mountain. The door crashed open and a figure appeared, snow-covered and massive, filling the doorframe like something out of a legend. Ella scrambled backward, her heart hammering, as the man shook off the snow and pulled back his hood. Cade Winters. She recognized him even through her shock. Everyone in Pine Ridge knew Cade Winters, though few had actually met him. He lived even higher up the mountain than Henderson, in a cabin he'd built himself after coming back from Afghanistan 5 years ago. Broken, people said. Dangerous. A man who'd seen too much and wanted nothing to do with anyone anymore. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to see anything but shadows. A thick beard covered half his face, and 3 parallel scars ran from his right temple to his jaw. People whispered about how he got those scars. None of the stories were good. What the hell are you doing here? His voice was rough, accusatory, as his eyes swept over Ellen kneeling beside Henderson's bed. He's having a heart attack, Ella said, forcing her voice steady even though everything in her wanted to shrink back from the intensity of this man's presence. He needs a hospital. Hospital's 20 miles away and the roads are gone. Cade moved past her with surprising gentleness, his hands, scarred, calloused, enormous, checking Henderson's pulse, his breathing, with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done field medicine. He won't make it 20 miles. Then what do we do? Ella heard the desperation in her own voice. Cade's eyes met hers for the first time, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Like he hadn't expected to find anyone capable of walking through a blizzard to check on a dying man. Like he'd forgotten people could still do things like that. We keep him alive until the storm breaks, Cade said. And we pray it breaks soon. The long night. What followed were hours that blurred together in a haze of fear and focus. Cade knew more about emergency medicine than any civilian should, barking orders that Ella followed without question. Aspirin to thin Henderson's blood. Blankets and body heat to fight the cold. Constant monitoring of his vitals. At some point, Cade got the backup generator running, and weak light flooded the house along with precious heat. They worked in tense silence, this broken soldier and this invisible librarian, both of them understanding that Henderson's life hung by a thread, and that thread was held in their combined hands. "How did you know to come?" Ella asked once, during a brief moment when Henderson was sleeping and Cade was checking the generator. "Saw your lights go out from my cabin," Cade said without looking at her. Knew Henderson was alone. Figured someone should check. "But you came through the storm." "That's..." Ella struggled for words. "That's incredibly dangerous." "So did you." Now he did look at her, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. Who walks 2 miles through a blizzard for a neighbor? Who drives 5 miles through one? She countered. The ghost of something that might have been a smile touched his scarred face. Stupid people, apparently. When everything changed, dawn came slowly, the storm finally exhausting itself into stillness. Henderson was stable, sleeping peacefully, his color better. The roads would still be impassable for hours, but Cade had already radioed for a medical helicopter on his emergency frequency. Military connections he'd never mentioned keeping. Ella stood by the window, watching the sun turn the snow-covered valley into something beautiful and terrible when Cade appeared beside her. Up close, in the gray morning light, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. "You saved his life," Cade said quietly. "If you hadn't come when you did." "We saved his life," Ella corrected. "I wouldn't have known what to do without you. You would have figured it out." His voice was certain. "You're tougher than you look." It was the first compliment anyone had given Ella in years that didn't feel like obligation or politeness. Coming from this man, this dangerous, broken, solitary man, it hit her like a physical force. "Thank you," she whispered. Cade turned to face her fully, and for a moment, Ella forgot to breathe. He was studying her like she was a puzzle he'd just realized he wanted to solve, like she'd somehow become visible to him in a way she'd never been visible to anyone. "You're Ella Monroe," he said, not a question. "You know who I am?" "Everyone knows the librarian." Something complicated crossed his face. "I just never really saw you before." Before Ella could process what that meant, before she could ask why a man who avoided everyone would know anything about her, the sound of helicopter rotors cut through the morning air. The medical team descended, professional and efficient, loading Henderson onto a stretcher. As they prepared to lift off, the lead medic turned to Ella and Cade. "You two saved his life. That's miracle work in conditions like these." He looked between them curiously. "You together?" "No," Ella said quickly. "Too quickly." "No," Cade echoed, but he was still looking at her in that intense way that made her pulse race. The medic shrugged. "Well, you make a hell of a team." As the helicopter rose into the pale sky, Ella became acutely aware that she was now alone with Cade Winters in Henderson's empty house, with miles of impassable snow between them and town, and absolutely no idea what to say to this man who'd appeared out of a storm like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was praying. "I should," she started. "The roads won't be clear for hours," Cade interrupted. "You can't walk back in this. It's too deep. I can't stay here." "Why not?" His eyes challenged her. "You afraid of me?" The honest answer was yes. Not because she thought he'd hurt her, Nothing in his actions suggested violence, but because something about the way he looked at her made her feel exposed in a way that terrified her. Like he could see past all the careful invisibility she'd built, straight down to the parts of herself she kept hidden even from her own reflection. "Should I be?" she asked instead. "Afraid of you?" Cade was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her heart ache. "Everyone else is. I'm not everyone else." "No," he said softly, and there was something raw in his expression now, something vulnerable. "No, you're definitely not." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and danger, and something neither of them seemed prepared to name. Outside, the world was white and silent and waiting. Inside, two people who'd spent years being invisible, him by choice, her by circumstance, had suddenly, impossibly, seen each other. And everything was about to change. But before either could speak, before the moment could tip into whatever came next, Ella's radio crackled to life. The sheriff's voice, staticky and urgent, cut through the tension. "Cade, you there? We've got a situation. The storm triggered an avalanche on Widow's Peak. There's a family trapped in their cabin, and you're the only one close enough to reach them before nightfall. We need you. Now." Cade's jaw tightened. His eyes never left Ella's face. "I have to go," he said, and she heard the conflict in his voice, the war between duty and something else, something new and fragile that had started growing between them in the hours they'd spent fighting to save a life. "I know," Ella whispered. "Come with me." The words shocked them both. Cade looked as surprised as Ella felt, like the invitation had escaped without permission. "What? Come with me?" he repeated, more certain now. "I might need help. You've already proven you're brave enough for this. And," he stopped, seemed to struggle with something internal. "And I don't want to leave you here alone." Ella should have said no, should have insisted she'd be fine, that she'd wait for the roads to clear, that going with this dangerous, intense man on a rescue mission into avalanche territory was absolute insanity. Instead, she heard herself say, "Okay." And as they prepared to head back into the cold, this time together, neither of them realized they were walking towards something far more dangerous than any mountain storm. They were walking toward each other. The ride to Widow's Peak in Cade's truck was tense and silent. The roads he knew, barely more than trails really, were buried under 3 feet of fresh powder, but the truck pushed through with stubborn determination, much like its owner. Ella gripped the door handle, watching the landscape transform into something alien and beautiful, trying not to think about what would happen if they got stuck out here, trying harder not to think about the man beside her. Cade drove with focused intensity, his jaw set, eyes scanning the terrain with the practiced alertness of someone who'd spent years in places where inattention meant death. Every few minutes, he'd glance at the GPS unit mounted on his dash, muttering coordinates under his breath, calculating angles and distances with an ease that spoke of extensive training. "You were Special Forces?" Ella said quietly. Not a question. His hands tightened on the wheel. "How'd you know?" "The way you handled Henderson. The medical knowledge. The way you move, like you're always assessing threats." She paused. "And the scars. People in town talk about the scars," Cade said, his voice carefully neutral. "Usually they're more creative about how I got them. Bar fight with a bear, according to Mrs. Peterson. That actually got a small laugh out of him, rough and unexpected. That one's new. Usually it's combat or prison. Was it combat?" The laugh died. "Does it matter?" "No," Ella said honestly. I'm trying to understand you." "Why?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with more weight than 4 letters should carry. Why was she trying to understand him? Why had she said yes to this insane rescue mission? Why did the way he'd looked at her this morning feel like the first time anyone had ever really seen her? "Because you saw me," she said finally, the truth escaping before she could stop it. "Back at Henderson's. You actually saw me. And I don't think anyone's done that in a very long time." Cade was quiet for so long Ella thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough with something that sounded like pain. "I know what it's like. To be invisible. To have people look straight through you because it's easier than seeing what's really there." He glanced at her briefly. "Or what's not there anymore?" "What's not there?" "The person I used to be." His hands flexed on the wheel. "The person who went to war. He didn't come back. What came back was something else. Something broken. And people in town, they can sense that. They avoid me because they can see I'm not whole anymore. Ella's chest tightened. You don't seem broken to me. You don't know me. Maybe not. But I know you drove through a blizzard to check on a neighbor. I know you spent all night keeping a man alive. I know you just volunteered for another rescue mission when you could have stayed safe. She turned to look at him fully. Those aren't the actions of a broken man. Those are the actions of a man trying to make up for things. Cade's voice had gone hard. Trying to save lives now because I took so many then. The confession settled between them like snowfall, quiet, inevitable, changing everything. How many families have you saved? Ella asked softly. How many people in this town owe you their lives, but don't even know it? Cade's jaw worked. That's different. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you've been invisible too. Not because you're broken, but because you're trying to be. Because it's easier than letting people see that you still care. That you're still trying. That you're still here, fighting to make things better. You think you have me figured out. There was a challenge in his voice now, but also something that sounded almost like hope. No, Ella said. But I'd like to. If you'll let me. Before Cade could respond, the truck crested a ridge and the situation came into full, terrible view. The impossible rescue. Widow's Peak was aptly named, a jagged outcropping of rock that overlooked the valley like a sentinel. Below it, barely visible through the snow, sat a small cabin. Above it, tons of snow and ice hung suspended on the mountainside, ready to let go at any moment. Oh God, Ella breathed. The Morrison family, Cade said grimly, already pulling the truck to a stop and grabbing gear from the back. Jack, his wife Sarah, and their 2 kids, 8 and 6. They came up for a weekend getaway and got caught by the storm. Can we reach them? The avalanche already came down once. Missed the cabin by maybe 20 feet, but it's unstable. Another slide could bury them completely. He was strapping on equipment as he talked. Ropes, carabiners, a medical pack. I can get down there, get them out. But the approach is narrow and the snow's unstable. If I'm carrying anyone, you need someone to help evacuate, Ella finished. Someone to help with the kids while you handle the adults. Cade looked at her, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. The need for help warring with the instinct to protect her from danger. This is serious, Ella. If the mountain lets go while we're down there, then it lets go, she interrupted. And we deal with it. But right now, there's a family trapped, and we're their only chance. So stop trying to protect me and tell me what to do. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Recognition of a kindred spirit. Someone else who understood that some things were worth the risk. Okay, he said. Okay, here's what we're going to do. The descent. Getting down to the cabin was the most terrifying thing Ella had ever done. Cade rigged a rope system, talking her through each step, his voice calm and steady even as the wind whipped around them and the snow beneath their feet made ominous creaking sounds. Don't look up, he instructed. Don't think about what's above us. Just focus on the next step. One foot, then the other. Ella focused on his voice, on the solid presence of him ahead of her on the rope, and tried not to think about how one wrong move could kill them both. They reached the cabin door, and Cade knocked, loud and urgent. Morrison family. It's Cade Winters. I'm here to get you out. The door flew open, and a man Ella vaguely recognized from town appeared, wild-eyed and desperate. Thank God. We heard the avalanche last night, and the radio said another one's coming, and I didn't know what to do. It's okay. Cade's voice cut through the panic like a blade. We're getting you out. But we have to move fast. Where's your wife and kids? What happened next moved in a blur. Sarah Morrison appeared with 2 small children, both crying, both terrified. The cabin was tilting slightly. The avalanche had undermined the foundation. They had minutes, maybe less. Ella, take the kids, Cade ordered. Get them up the rope one at a time. I'll harness them. You guide them up. Can you do that? Yes. Good. Jack, Sarah, you're going to follow once the kids are safe. Everyone understand. They understood. They had no choice. When the mountain spoke. The first child, Emma, 8 years old and shaking so hard she could barely stand, went up the rope with Ella guiding her every step. It took 5 minutes that felt like hours. Then the second child, Michael, 6, and even more terrified. Ella talked to him the whole way, keeping her voice gentle and steady even though her own heart was hammering. You're doing so good, Michael. Just a little further. That's it. One hand, then the other. You're so brave. Sarah Morrison went next, then Jack. By the time everyone was up, Ella's arms were screaming and her hands were raw inside her gloves. But they were alive. All of them. Cade was the last up, moving with efficiency born of years of combat extractions. He'd just cleared the danger zone when the mountain made its decision. The sound started as a rumble, deep and primal. Then it grew, a roar that seemed to come from the earth itself. Ella turned and watched in horror as the entire face of Widow's Peak let go, tons of snow and ice cascading down in a white wall of destruction. The cabin disappeared in seconds, swallowed whole. If they'd been 30 seconds slower. Move! Cade's voice snapped everyone out of their shock. Back to the truck now. They ran, stumbled, half-carried the children through snow that fought every step. Behind them, the avalanche was spreading, fingers of destruction reaching wider. The truck was there, impossibly close and yet too far, and Ella's lungs burned and her legs screamed, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying. They made it. Somehow, impossibly, they made it. Cade threw the truck into gear and they lurched forward, racing the avalanche's reach. And for one terrible moment Ella thought they wouldn't clear it. Thought the mountain would claim them after all. But Cade knew these mountains. Knew every trail and shortcut and escape route. He pushed the truck to its limits and beyond. And when they finally stopped, miles away and safe, Ella looked back to see Widow's Peak obscured by a cloud of snow dust, the entire landscape transformed. In the back seat, the Morrison children were crying. Their parents were holding them, holding each other, alive when they had no right to be. And in the front seat, Cade's hands were shaking on the wheel. The breaking point. They delivered the Morrisons to the sheriff's station in town, where emergency services was coordinating storm response. The family tried to thank them, tried to find words big enough to encompass being saved from death, but there were no such words. All they could do was hold each other and cry and look at Cade and Ella like they were something holy. Cade left before anyone could ask questions. Ella followed because she didn't know what else to do, climbing into his truck as he drove not toward town but away from it, higher into the mountains, toward his cabin. They rode in silence until he finally pulled to a stop in front of a structure that was half home, half fortress. Beautiful and isolated, and exactly what she'd expected from a man trying to hide from the world. Cade got out without a word and walked inside, leaving the door open behind him. An invitation. A test. Ella wasn't sure which. She followed. The inside of the cabin was sparse, but surprisingly warm. A fire burned in a stone hearth. Books lined one wall, survival manuals mixed with poetry and philosophy. A dog appeared from somewhere, some kind of shepherd mix, and regarded Ella with friendly curiosity. "That's Ghost," Cade said, his back to her as he fed wood into the fire. "He's good with people. Unlike his owner." That made him turn. His face was drawn, exhausted, and something in his eyes looked raw. "You should go, Ella. Back to town. Back to your quiet life in your library where it's safe." "Why?" "Because I'm not safe." The words came out harsh. "Because people who get close to me tend to get hurt. Because I've seen things and done things that hollowed me out, and there's nothing left inside worth knowing." "That's not true. You don't know what I've done." His voice cracked. "The things I did in the war. The people I killed. I was good at it, Ella. I was really good at it, and part of me enjoyed it. And when I came home I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize what looked back. So I came up here to this mountain and I stay here, because it's better for everyone if I'm alone." Ella took a step toward him. "You saved 4 people today. For people who are alive because you risked everything. That doesn't make up for." "I'm not asking you to make up for anything. Another step. I'm asking you to stop punishing yourself for being human. You don't understand. Then make me understand." She was close enough now to see the anguish in his face, the war he was fighting with himself. "Talk to me, Cade. Tell me what happened. Tell me why you think you deserve to be alone." And something in him broke. The walls he'd built so carefully, the armor he wore to keep everyone at a distance, it cracked and fell away, and what poured out was raw and painful and real. He told her about Afghanistan, about missions gone wrong and impossible choices, about a day when his convoy was ambushed and he'd had to decide who lived and who died, about the weight of command and the cost of survival and the impossible burden of coming home when so many didn't. He told her about the guilt that ate at him in the dark hours, about nightmares that never stopped, about the way civilian life felt like a play he'd forgotten how to act in, with everyone speaking a language he no longer understood. He told her everything, and Ella listened, didn't flinch, didn't judge, just listened with the same quiet attention she gave to patrons in her library who needed someone to hear them. When he finally stopped, exhausted and hollow, she said simply, "Thank you." "For what?" "For trusting me with the truth. For letting me see you." She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and took his hand. "You're not a monster, Cade. You're a man who survived impossible things and is trying to figure out how to live with it. That doesn't make you broken. That makes you human." "How can you say that?" His voice was barely a whisper. "How can you look at me and not see? I see a man who chose to check on a neighbor in a blizzard, who spent all night saving a life, who risked everything today to rescue a family. I see someone who's been invisible by choice, hiding from the world because he's afraid of hurting people." She squeezed his hand. "I see you, Cade. All of you. And I'm not afraid. You should be." "Why? Because you think you're dangerous?" Ella's voice was gentle but firm. "The only person you're dangerous to is yourself. And I'm not going to let you keep doing that." Cade stared at her, and something in his expression shifted, softened. "Why do you care?" "Because I know what it's like to be invisible. To think that's all you deserve." She held his gaze. "And because someone very wise once told me that I was tougher than I looked, that I would have figured things out on my own. He saw something in me I didn't see in myself. And now I'm seeing something in him he doesn't see." "What's that?" "Someone worth knowing. Someone worth caring about. Someone who deserves to be seen." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and risk and the terrifying vulnerability of truth. Outside, night was falling over the mountain, painting the snow-covered world in shades of blue and silver. Inside, two people who'd spent so long being invisible were finally, impossibly, seeing each other clearly. Cade took a step closer, then another, until they were standing so close Ella could feel the heat radiating from him, could count the shades of pain and hope warring in his eyes. "I don't know how to do this," he said roughly. "I don't know how to let someone in." "Neither do I," Ella admitted. "But maybe we can figure it out together." His hand came up slowly, hesitantly, and cupped her face with a gentleness that made her eyes burn. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." "That's not true." "Yes, it is. You walked through a blizzard. You helped save a family. And now you're standing here telling a broken soldier he deserves to be cared about. If that's not bravery, I don't know what is." Ella's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Cade." He leaned in, and she could feel his breath on her lips, could see every scar and shadow and secret written in his face. This was the moment. The precipice. The point of no return. And then Ghost barked, sharp and urgent, and Cade jerked back, immediately alert. "What is it, boy?" The dog was at the door, hackles raised, focused on something outside. Cade moved to the window, his entire posture changed, military now, threat assessment mode. "There's someone out there," he said quietly. "In the storm." Moving toward the cabin. Ella joined him at the window and saw it, a figure stumbling through the snow, barely visible in the gathering dark. Moving erratically, like they were injured or lost or both. Cade was already grabbing his coat and medical pack. "Stay here." "Like hell." Ella grabbed her own coat. "We do this together, remember?" He looked at her, and despite the urgency, something warm flickered in his eyes. Together. They went out into the cold together, Ghost leading the way. The figure was closer now, and Ella could see it was a woman. Young, maybe early 20s, her clothes inadequate for the weather, her face pale and lips blue with cold. She saw them and tried to run, stumbled, fell. Cade caught her before she hit the ground. "Please," the woman gasped, her whole body shaking. "Please, you have to help me. They're coming. They're going to find me, Anne." She passed out in Cade's arms. They got her inside, wrapped her in blankets, started treating hypothermia. But as Ella helped peel off the woman's frozen jacket, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Bruises, dark and deliberate, patterning her arms and ribs. And on her wrist, partially hidden by her sleeve, a tattoo. 3 numbers that Ella recognized from her years shelving books on organized crime. A trafficking mark. Ella's eyes met Cade's over the unconscious woman's body. His face had gone hard, the soldier surfacing again, reading the situation with instant clarity. This isn't over, he said quietly. Whoever she's running from, they're still out there. And now they know where we are. As if summoned by his words, headlights appeared in the distance, moving fast up the mountain road. Multiple vehicles, coming straight for the cabin. Ghost growled low in his throat. Cade moved to the window, his hand automatically reaching for something. A weapon, Ella realized. He had weapons here. Of course he did. Ella, he said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. I need you to take her upstairs. There's a room at the end of the hall, reinforced, no windows. Lock yourselves in. Don't come out until I say it's safe. What are you going to do? He turned to look at her, and she saw it clearly now. The warrior he'd been, the part of him that had survived wars and impossible odds. Not broken, never broken, just dormant. Whatever I have to, he said, to protect you. The headlights were closer now. Ella could hear engines, voices. Men who trafficked in human lives, coming to collect their property. Coming for the woman unconscious on Cade's floor. Coming for Ella herself, now that she'd been seen. And Cade Winters, the broken soldier who thought he was too dangerous to love, stood between them and the dark, ready to do what he'd always done. Save lives, no matter the cost. The knock on the door, when it came, was polite, almost friendly. We know she's in there, a voice called out. Just hand her over and we'll leave. No trouble. No one has to get hurt. Cade looked at Ella one last time. In his eyes, she saw everything he hadn't said. Everything that might never get the chance to be said if the next few minutes went wrong. Go, he whispered. Please. And as Ella helped the unconscious woman upstairs, as she locked the reinforced door behind them and heard the voices below turn from polite to threatening, she realized something that should have terrified her, but somehow didn't. She trusted him. This man she barely knew. This dangerous, broken, beautiful soldier. She trusted him to save them. She trusted him to survive. And more than anything, she trusted that whatever came next, they would face it together. If they lived through tonight. The voices below had stopped being polite. Ella pressed her ear to the reinforced door, her heart hammering, trying to hear what was happening. The woman, she'd whispered her name was Sophie before passing out again, lay on the bed behind her, shivering despite the blankets, trapped in whatever nightmare had driven her to Cade's door. Last chance, a man's voice called out, hard and cold. Give us the girl and walk away. Try to be a hero and you'll regret it. Cade's response was too quiet to hear, but Ella knew him well enough by now to imagine the tone. Calm, unmovable. The voice of someone who'd faced down worse threats and lived. Then the shooting started. The sound was deafening even through the thick walls. Ella's breath caught as she heard glass shatter, heard Cade's voice sharp with command, heard Ghost barking viciously. Her hands were shaking, her whole body rigid with terror, but she forced herself to move away from the door, to check on Sophie, to do the only thing she could in this moment. Wait. Trust. Hope. The gunfire stopped as abruptly as it started. Heavy footsteps on the porch. Voices raised in pain and anger. Then silence, so complete it was worse than the noise. Cade. Ella called out, unable to stop herself. Cade. Nothing continue 15:11. The silence stretched, endless and terrible. Ella's mind conjured 1,000 horrible images. Cade bleeding out downstairs. The traffickers searching the house. Sophie dragged back into the nightmare she'd escaped. Then, finally, his voice. Rough and exhausted but alive. Ella. It's okay. You can come out. She unlocked the door with trembling hands and stepped into the hallway. The scene below made her gasp. 3 men were zip-tied on the floor, all of them conscious, but looking significantly worse for wear. One had a broken nose, another a dislocated shoulder. The third just looked shocked, like he couldn't quite believe he'd been taken down so efficiently. Cade stood over them, a weapon in his hand that he was already securing, Ghost at his side. His knuckles were bleeding and there was a cut over his eye, but otherwise he looked unharmed. More than unharmed. He looked like a man who'd just remembered exactly who he was, what he was capable of. Their eyes met across the cabin. In his gaze, Ella saw relief so profound it was almost physical. He'd been terrified too, she realized. Not of the men with guns, but of failing. Of letting her down. Of losing her before he'd even had the chance to keep her. You're okay, she breathed. You're okay, he echoed, and the way he said it, like it was the only thing that mattered in the world. made something in Ella's chest crack wide open. The truth comes out. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later with 3 deputies and expressions that said they'd seen enough tonight. The traffickers were loaded into cars while Ella gave her statement, trying to make sense of the past few hours, trying to explain how a quiet librarian had ended up in a firefight on a mountain. Sophie, finally conscious and coherent, told her story to a female deputy. Kidnapped 3 months ago from Seattle. Moved through a network of safe houses. Managed to escape when her captors stopped for gas near Pine Ridge. She'd seen lights on the mountain and run toward them, toward hope, never knowing that hope would come in the form of a broken soldier and an invisible woman. You probably saved her life, the sheriff told Ella quietly. Both of you, if she'd been out there much longer. We just did what anyone would do, Ella said automatically. No, the sheriff's voice was firm. You did what heroes do. There's a difference. When the law enforcement finally left, taking Sophie to a hospital and the traffickers to jail, Ella and Cade were alone again. The cabin was a disaster, bullet holes in the walls, broken windows letting in the cold, blood on the floor that would need cleaning. But they were alive. Sophie was safe. The bad guys were caught. Victory should have felt better than the hollow exhaustion settling over both of them. I should go, Ella said quietly. Let you clean up. Rest. Don't. The word stopped her at the door. She turned to find Cade looking at her with an expression that was equal parts vulnerable and determined. Don't go, he repeated. Not yet. Please. Cade. I almost lost you tonight. His voice was rough. Those men came here because of a woman I was protecting, and you were upstairs in the crossfire, and all I could think was that if something happened to you, if I failed to keep you safe, I would never forgive myself. Because in the middle of all that chaos, I realized something. Ella's heart was pounding. What? That I've been invisible for 5 years because I thought that's what I deserved. That I thought being alone was safer than risking connection. But then you walked through a blizzard to check on a neighbor, and you didn't flinch when you saw my scars, and you looked at me like I was someone worth knowing instead of someone to be feared. He took a step toward her. You made me visible again, Ella. You made me want to be visible. I didn't do anything, she whispered. You were always there. Always fighting. Always trying. I just saw it. Exactly. Another step. You saw me. Really saw me. And I saw you. The woman everyone overlooks. The one they take for granted. The quiet librarian who's actually the bravest, kindest, most incredible person I've ever met. Ella felt tears prick her eyes. I'm not. You are. He was close enough now to touch, but he didn't. Just stood there, giving her the choice. And I don't want to be invisible anymore. Not from you. I don't want to hide up here on this mountain pretending I'm fine when I'm not. Pretending I don't need anyone when the truth is I need you. I need your kindness and your courage and the way you make the world feel less heavy just by being in it. Cade. Ella breathed, but he wasn't done. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. I know I'm probably crazy for feeling this way after 2 days. But Ella, when I thought those men might hurt you, when I was downstairs fighting to keep you safe, I realized something else. His voice dropped, went soft and certain. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I already have. And I don't want to waste any more time being afraid of that. The confession hung in the air between them, brave and terrifying and achingly honest. Ella looked at this man, scarred and strong and so impossibly vulnerable, and felt every defense she'd ever built crumble to dust. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. And it terrifies me, because I've been invisible for so long that I forgot what it felt like to be seen, to be wanted, to matter to someone. You matter. Cade's hand came up, cupped her face with a gentleness that made her eyes burn. You matter so much it scares me. Because I don't know how to do this, Ella. I don't know how to love someone without being afraid I'll fail them, that I'll let them down when it matters most. Then we learn together, Ella said, echoing her words from earlier. We figure it out as we go. We be brave together. Together, Cade repeated, and finally, he closed the distance and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like neither of them quite believed this was real. Then it deepened, grew urgent, became a promise and a plea and a homecoming all at once. Ella's hands found his chest, felt his heart hammering just as hard as hers, and thought that this was what it felt like to be truly seen, truly known, truly home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cade rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Not just tonight. Stay. Help me fix this place up. Help me figure out how to live instead of just survive. Stay and let me learn how to love you the way you deserve. Okay, Ella said, because it was the only answer that made sense. Okay, yes, I'll stay. 3 months later, the spring thaw came to Pine Ridge slowly, revealing a world transformed. The snow melted to expose wildflowers and green grass. The mountain peaks lost their white caps, and in a cabin that had once been a fortress, windows that had been boarded up were thrown open to let in light. Ella stood in what had become her library, a room Cade had helped her build, with shelves lining every wall and a window seat that overlooked the valley. Books filled the space now, borrowed from her collection in town, mixed with his survival manuals and philosophy texts. A blend of both of them, creating something new. You ready? Cade appeared in the doorway, Ghost at his heels. He looked different than he had 3 months ago. Lighter. The shadows in his eyes hadn't disappeared entirely. Ella suspected they never would, but they'd receded. Made room for other things. Like joy. Like hope. Like love. Almost, Ella said, checking her reflection one more time. The town council had asked them to speak at a community event about emergency preparedness and looking out for neighbors. Their first public appearance as a couple, really acknowledging what everyone in Pine Ridge already knew. That the broken soldier and the invisible librarian had found each other, had saved each other, had chosen to stop being invisible together. Nervous? Cade asked, moving to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. Terrified, Ella admitted. What if they still see me the same way? The quiet woman they never noticed. Then they're blind. He kissed her temple. Because you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met. And if they can't see that, it's their loss. Ella turned in his arms, looking up at this man who'd taught her that being seen was worth the risk. I love you. I love you too. He kissed her softly. Now come on. Let's show them what real heroes look like. They drove into town together, Ghost in the back seat. The community center was packed when they arrived. Seemingly the entire town had turned out. Ella felt her stomach clench with familiar anxiety, the old urge to shrink back and disappear rising up. Then Cade took her hand, squeezed tight, and she remembered. She wasn't invisible anymore. Didn't want to be. Didn't have to be. The presentation went better than Ella had feared. They talked about the night they'd saved Henderson, about the rescue at Widow's Peak, about the importance of checking on neighbors and being prepared for mountain weather. Cade spoke about the value of military training in civilian life. Ella talked about the resources available at the library for emergency preparedness. They didn't mention the traffickers. That story belonged to Sophie, and she was safe now in a program that was helping her rebuild her life. She'd called Ella last week to say thank you, her voice stronger than it had been that terrible night. When the presentation ended, the applause was genuine. People came up to shake their hands, to thank them, to actually see them, both of them, in a way they never had before. Mrs. Peterson, the woman who'd started the bear fight rumor, approached with tears in her eyes. I owe you an apology, she said to Cade. Both of you. I believed terrible things about you, and I was wrong. You're a hero. You both are. We're just people who were in the right place at the right time, Cade said quietly. No. The sheriff joined them, his expression serious. You're people who chose to act when you could have looked away, who risked everything to help strangers. That's not luck. That's character. And this town is lucky to have you. Later, as they drove back up the mountain with the sunset painting the valley gold and pink, Ella reflected on how much had changed in 3 months. How she'd gone from invisible to seen, from alone to loved, from afraid to brave. What are you thinking? Cade asked, one hand on the wheel, the other holding hers. That I'm happy, Ella said simply. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I'm actually happy. Me too. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. I was thinking, maybe it's time we made this permanent. Ella's heart skipped. What do you mean? Instead of answering, Cade pulled the truck over at a scenic overlook. The valley spread out below them, the town just visible in the distance, the mountains rising on all sides in shades of purple and blue. He got out, came around to her door, helped her out. Ghost bounded off to explore, while Cade took both of Ella's hands in his. 3 months ago, you walked through a blizzard to check on a neighbor, he said. You saved a man's life. helped rescue a family, showed a broken soldier that he was still worth something. And every day since, you've made me want to be better, to do better, to actually live instead of just existing. Cade, let me finish. His smile was gentle. You taught me that being invisible isn't the same as being safe. That hiding from the world doesn't protect the people you love. It just keeps you from loving them at all. You made me brave enough to be seen again, to let people in, to believe I deserved good things. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Ella's breath caught. I don't have much to offer, Cade continued, his voice rough with emotion. Just a cabin on a mountain and a dog and a man who's still figuring out how to be whole. But I can promise you this. I will see you every day for the rest of my life. I will choose you every morning and fall asleep grateful you chose me back. I will stand between you and anything that tries to hurt you. And I will be brave because you taught me how. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band, engraved with a pattern that looked like mountains. Ella Monroe, will you marry me? Will you stay visible with me? Will you build a life where we both get to be seen and known and loved? Ella was crying, but they were good tears. Happy tears. The tears of someone who'd been lost and was finally, impossibly home. Yes, she whispered. Yes, absolutely yes. Cade slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise being kept. Behind them, Ghost barked joyfully. Below them, the valley glowed in the sunset light. And two people who'd spent so long being invisible held each other on a mountain and chose to be seen. Chose to be brave. Chose to love. Together. Epilogue, 1 year later. The wedding was small, just close friends and the people from town who'd come to know and respect them. Henderson was there, healthy and grateful. The Morrison family came, their kids presenting Ella with drawings of the rescue heroes. Sophie attended via video call from her new life in Portland, smiling and strong and free. They got married at sunrise on the mountain, with the valley spread below them and the peaks standing witness. Ella wore a simple dress the color of fresh snow. Cade wore his dress uniform for the first time in 5 years, medals pinned to his chest, standing tall and proud and healed. I see you, Ella said when it was her turn for vows, her voice carrying clear in the mountain air. I see all of you, the warrior and the protector, the broken places and the healing ones, the man you were and the man you're becoming. And I choose all of it. All of you. Forever. I see you, Cade echoed, his eyes bright. The brave woman who walks through blizzards, who faces down traffickers, who makes the world better just by being in it. You taught me that being seen isn't something to fear, it's something to celebrate. And I celebrate you every day. When they kissed, the small crowd erupted in applause. Ghost howled happily. And somewhere in the valley below, the town that had once overlooked them both now celebrated the love they'd fought so hard to claim. Later, at the reception held in the community center, the sheriff raised his glass for a toast. To Cade and Ella, he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. Two people who taught us all what it means to be a hero. Not the kind who seek glory or recognition, but the kind who simply choose to act when action is needed. Who choose to care when caring is hard. Who choose to love when love requires courage. He looked at them both with genuine warmth. You remind us that the most overlooked people are often the most remarkable. That broken things can be made whole. That invisibility is a choice, not a sentence. And that sometimes, the greatest love stories start with a simple act of bravery. The crowd raised their glasses. To Cade and Ella. As the celebration continued, Cade pulled Ella onto the makeshift dance floor. Neither of them were good dancers, but it didn't matter. They swayed together under string lights, surrounded by people who finally saw them clearly, holding each other like the treasures they were. Happy, Cade murmured against her hair. Incredibly, Ella said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Good. He pulled back to look at her, and in his eyes she saw their future. Children, maybe. More rescues, definitely. A life built on courage and kindness and the daily choice to be visible, to be known, to be loved. What are you thinking, she asked. That a year ago, I was alone on a mountain, convinced I deserved to be. That I was too broken to love anyone, too dangerous to let anyone close. His hand cupped her face. And then a woman walked through a blizzard to check on a neighbor, and everything changed. Everything changed for me too, Ella said softly. You made me brave. No. Cade smiled, that rare, beautiful smile that still took her breath away. You were always brave. I just helped you see it. They danced until the stars came out, until the guests began to leave, until it was just the two of them and the mountain and the infinite possibility of tomorrow. And as they drove home together, truly home now, to the cabin they'd transformed from fortress to haven, Ella thought about the journey that had brought them here. The blizzard and the rescue. The avalanche and the traffickers. Every moment of fear and courage and choosing to be seen. It had all led to this. To love. To belonging. To the extraordinary gift of being known. In the valley below, Pine Ridge settled in for the night. Lights winked out one by one as people went to bed, secure in their homes, safe in their community. And on the mountain above, two people who'd once been invisible stood at their window, looking out at the world they'd chosen to rejoin, holding hands in the darkness, brave enough to be seen, brave enough to love, brave enough to believe they deserved every good thing they'd fought so hard to find. Together, always together.